Futurum Tech Podcast, the interview series. I'm your host today, Daniel Newman, Principal Analyst and Founding Partner at Futurum Research. And I'm excited about this interview conversation that I have today. I'll be joined by Yaron Sverdlov of Amdocs, and we're going to be talking about the service provider, the journey that these organizations are on, digitally transforming their businesses, their operations, the financials, and the way they're moving their services to the cloud. It's going to be a really fun conversation, so we're glad to have you here. Yaron Sverdlov, welcome to the Futurum Tech Podcast interview series. How are you doing today?
Hi, Daniel. Thank you very much for hosting me here today. I'm very excited to share some of my insights working for Amdocs. A few words about who I am. So I'm the general manager of a division called SmartOps within Amdocs. Amdocs is a company giving solutions and services to telecommunication companies. And my division is the one doing the operation for customers. So my customers are typically large telecommunication companies like AT&T, T-Mobile, Bell Canada, and so on. And basically, we're doing everything from running data centers to doing a BPO.
Well, welcome to the show. I'm really excited to have you here. I'm sure everybody out there can sense that you're calling in from somewhere other than here in the States. So I always like to tell people, where are you? We used to actually see people in person. We used to go to events together. We would shake hands. I actually met the Amdocs team for the first time in Nice, France for the Digital Transformation World event. But you are where today?
So I'm living in Israel. Typically, in normal days, I will tell you that I'm somewhere around the world because I usually just travel all the time. But with the COVID-19 coming up in the last 6 months, I'm located back home in Israel.
Absolutely. I think we're all at home. I always tell people, Yaron, I traveled 47 to 48 weeks a year. I did over 200,000 air miles almost each of the last 4 years, 4 to 6 continents a year. And this year, it went from like a crazy travel. I think I had almost 49 weeks booked already in March when everything shut down. And it's just been the weirdest thing. It really has been weird. But we've seen, and I'm sure you have too, that despite the unfortunate circumstances that have been caused by this pandemic, digital transformation and technology adoption has accelerated rapidly. And we are doing a lot more Zoom meetings, but there's a lot more to it. And we're going to talk about that today.
Yeah, you're right. We are doing things differently. And for sure, the current situation pushed digital transformation like nothing else has pushed. I think that it's not just that. In general, we had to cope with something which was totally new, and therefore we have needed to challenge all of our paradigms. We could not continue to do business like we've done in the past, so we needed to reinvent ourselves. And I'm talking about we, but this is like the entire world. So yeah, flights have stopped. Zoom becoming our day-to-day most useful tool. And digital is a must. It used to be a very good tool to increase sales and to give good services, but today it's just a must.
It's absolutely reinventing so many businesses. And as a company that works so closely with so many of the world service providers, I'm sure many are turning to Amdocs and to your team to help them digitally transform their businesses. Working so closely, Yaron, with the service providers around the world and transforming your own business, moving and working to migrate more of your partners to cloud and reinventing operations, all the things I talked about when I introduced the show. I guess I'm first and foremost just kind of curious, how has this global pandemic sort of influenced your service providers, their digital transformations, and what they're investing in today?
So I would say to start with is that the telecommunication companies were lucky relatively to others because their core business of getting us connected is becoming mandatory more than ever. We are doing this podcast from across the world using connectivity. But this is becoming like our day-to-day. My all day, working 12 hours a day, just jumping from one Zoom meeting to another, create a situation that I have to have a very strong connectivity at home, more than I was depending on before. So from that point of view, I would say that the telecommunication companies have, people might look at them and say, okay, they were not impacted like the flight companies or hoteling industry. However, to keep in business, they have to change. Many companies were counting on their reach to the market by having shops They might add a call center that work in a specific way and less of a self-service type of operation. Obviously, it's changing in different continents and different countries. You can imagine that when I look at the US market, it was much more advanced than when I look at India, but the problem is global. And us as a global provider to telco all around the world, we see the need to become more advanced, more digital, more open, more self-service, and enable a different level of support. So this for sure was one of the shifts that we are starting to see. We see countries which were less depending on digital channels and more of traditional channels, moving to the digital channels as well. And we see it all across the world in one way or another, but obviously the developing world is more focused on that. In parallel to that, we see the need for additional ability to ramp up services fast, to react fast to a very, very fast changing market. And with this, companies that have not yet started the journey to the cloud or that worked in more traditional ways had to move to an agile DevOps, a cloud environment that enables them to react much faster. Anything that we knew 6 months ago has changed. But it's not like 6 months ago we understood already how the companies need to operate, and we're just doing it from that time on. We are coping. We are changing all the time. And this pace of changing, when I talk about changing the telecommunication companies, we need to keep in mind, 30 years ago, we had mobile. What mobile was basically a mobile phone making calls. Not even SMSs, right? No one thought when we talk about telecommunication companies about the media, about TV. No IPTVs at that time. TV was either cable or satellite. It was a very different world. It took probably like 10 years or 15 years after we started to have the first mobile calls when we moved to SMSs. And then another 5 to 6 years when we started to do data and we had the first iPhone and we started to look at YouTube. And now we're doing so many services.
It sounds like that the COVID-19 pandemic has really pushed the digital transformation initiatives you're on. And that's exactly what we've seen at Futurum Research. We've been watching, it's been across the board. Obviously, connectivity has been the underpinnings of enabling society. The fact that we've been able to continue to have these meetings, schools have been able to continue to function with remote learning, workplaces and enterprises are able to stay connected with their customers. E-commerce has been the outlet for so many companies that couldn't open up their retail stores. It's also been a tool to allow takeout food to replace dine-in in restaurants and so on and so on and so on. So connectivity is more important than ever before. This put a lot of pressure on the backbones of service providers. These service providers are the ones that deliver the connectivity. This means pressure on operations, pressure on the financials of these companies, and pressure on the service and the quality of service. And you kind of alluded to, we already knew that cloud, for instance, was going to be an investment that needed to be made. This wasn't actually a surprise to anyone. It was just the feeling going into 2020 pre-pandemic was there would be time. There would be time to evolve. It could be done gradually over the next few years. Rollouts of services could be done gradually. Moving to NFV for network function virtualization. We're moving to software-defined enhancements. It was something that could be done over time. And now that time's out of the question. So cloud, for instance, so important. And you mentioned this, but are the service providers, what are you seeing? Are they able to make this migration? Are they speeding it up? Are there big inhibitors? What's been sort of the trends that you're seeing in terms of hybrid and multi-cloud adoption?
So that's a great question. I think that when I look at the direction of the telco going in the cloud, I think that you're right. Up until a few months ago, obviously there were the first few brave. There are always those that go ahead of the herd and do the changes. But many of them were just lagging behind, waiting to see what to do. Typically, when you come to talk with the CTIO or CIO of a company, you will hear about two reasons why not to go to the cloud. One will be security risks. Another will be the fact that they felt they are going to give a blank check to the cloud companies, and they have no control of that when they used to use their own on-prem. They knew, I'm buying a server, this is my cost, I cannot overrun my cost. Now, suddenly, we're going into a much more riskier environment. All of that becoming less relevant when you are risking your business. If you cannot run your business, then having a risk of security risk or having a big bill at the end of the month is less important, I guess. However, also, we see much better maturity. I would not say that we are fully mature there, but we see much better maturity in the market to tackle those issues. So whether it's security, whether it's a FinOp area, we see that those big barriers are lifting and we can move on. And over here, the question that I hear typically when I'm meeting those companies is, okay, we want to go to the cloud, but obviously, we cannot go with hundreds of applications that we have currently and tomorrow close our data centers. So the next question typically is where to start, what to go first. And over here, there is no one answer that answer this for everyone. It's different companies with different style. I see companies that are moving to, most of them probably moving to digital first. So all the new stuff that need to move fast and they want to be very agile, they will move them first. All the new projects will be microservices on the cloud and so on. But at the same time, we all understand everything is very well connected. And if you keep your legacy on and not lift and shift it in some way and do some additional capabilities on it, so you probably need to modernize a bit, you will not be able to gain all the benefits that a cloud environment can get you. So we see different models. We see different approaches. I don't think there is one telco in the world today, after the last 6 months, that is not in the middle of their, or in the beginning of their journey to the cloud. So we are in exciting times. That's a great place to be in the market.
Yeah, and you mentioned there isn't one, and that's got to be a great opportunity for Amdocs because where you sit as a trusted partner in this type of migration to the service providers. I want to hear more about that, but you mentioned a couple things that actually really caught my attention. The first thing you mentioned was security, and I think that's such an important topic. It maybe isn't being discussed that much, but as we've created a world that remote connectivity is everything, security has become a much bigger vector of problem and opportunity for the bad and the good. Companies need to be much more careful to protect data, protect assets. Service providers are, of course, going to be in the middle of that. So being able to support their needs is going to be something that they're going to really be looking for firms like yours to help with. Now, the other thing you mentioned, and I'll give you a chance to address both these things, is operations. So just wanting to move to cloud, like you said, everyone's doing it to some extent. Some have moved and really are fully or very close to having fully developed cloud operations and are doing this day in and day out and delivering almost all of the services in that capacity. Others are in various stages in between, still doing a lot of traditional service delivery and everywhere in between. So one of the things that I've learned about what you're doing at Amdocs is, you're really focused on engineering-driven operation. You're focused on that backbone in terms of being able to support this journey to cloud, this journey for digital transformation and hybrid IT. So talk a little bit about the importance for service providers to prioritize using engineering-driven operations to actually accelerate this migration to cloud, this digital transformation into adopting hybrid IT across their cloud and data center environments.
Okay, so I think that you touched a very important point. Hybrid IT is where most of those companies will be in for the next quite few years. I don't believe that we're going to see many companies, there will be few, that will be all cloud. Not when we're talking about corporates that have been there for 30 years. They probably have a long list of applications and solutions. It's going to be a huge expense and not sure that there will be a full return on investment to go to the cloud with everything. It's required time, it's required processes. So we're going to see an hybrid solution for a while now. When we talk about hybrid, there are two dimensions for that, and we need to keep that in mind. Hybrid on one end means on-prem and off-prem. So on-prem, your data center, and off-prem meaning the public cloud. And when we talk about hybrid, we're also talking about multiple cloud. And the obvious names, being Azure or Amazon or Google, but it's not just them. There are many other cloud providers. And we're probably going to see that as we go into the more aggressive migration to the cloud, not a single cloud approach by any of the customers, but rather multiple companies will go to multiple cloud provider at the same time. And the operation from that point of view is going to be very complex because you need to triage issues across different domains. You need to be able to have a single pane of glass to be able to see what you need to do. And with a very, very dynamic environment where systems are scaling up, scaling down, jumping from one cloud to another, you need to be able to control all of that. And for that, companies like Amdocs have bringing into the picture what we call the HCMP, the Hybrid Cloud Management Platform, that allows you to manage the security that you mentioned before, which is very important, the FinOps part, and also the provisioning and the rollout. So when we're talking about the cloud, we're definitely going to see an hybrid approach but by most of the customers, and we're going to see an operation that is going to be much more complex than ever before. I do want to say that on the journey to the cloud, operation is the last stage. And we should not underestimate the complexity of it, and we need to be ready for it. But you also need to remember that there are a couple of stages before. So planning what to migrate to the cloud, and then do the migration itself. And whether you're doing it in a one-stop shop company like Amdocs, or you're doing it with different advisors and do the operation yourself, you need to be prepared. And when we are talking about preparation, we're talking about always three factors. We're talking about the people, we're talking about the processes, and we're talking about technology. And I kept on talking about technology until now, talking about the different cloud operation and so on. But we also need to understand that both the people and the processes, which are currently running on-prem, will not be able to just move to the cloud in a sweep of a keyboard. And the complexity will be that they will need to do both at the same time. They will need to run the on-prem operation and the cloud operation for quite a few years from now. So I think that companies that will succeed and will try to move to the cloud and will enable themselves to go through a successful digital transformation will be companies that will train their people, build the processes, bring the technology, and at the same time, be ready to work it out in a hybrid mode, on-prem, off-prem, and when we're talking about off-prem, across different cloud providers.
Yeah, you make a lot of great points. And of course, I think there's going to be the human aspect and there's going to be the machine aspect, Yaron. And so as you build out these practices, we're going to see big investments in these operations, and we're also going to see significant investments in data, automation, artificial intelligence that's going to enable typical routine processes to be expedited, right? That the cloud and the underpinnings, the architectural underpinnings will make these service providers more efficient in getting things, identifying anomalies, things like fraud or things like connectivity issues, getting things repaired and back up quickly. And I think it's going to be that combination. We're going to be able to up-level the entire operation, up-level the entire customer experience, and really help service providers bring that next generation of not only connectivity, but reliability that comes with these upgrades. And I'm sure that's something you guys at Amdocs are thinking about every single day. I guess I'd love to touch on something else that's really important too, and something that's important to your business, and that's the financial side of this for service providers and for the industry, right? The tools to manage in engineering and deliver operationally is important. But the other thing that really going to the cloud, hybrid IT architectures and modernization is to optimize the ability to deliver services, to charge appropriately for them, to track them, to monitor them. How important is this particular aspect? Moving financial management and FinOps tools to the cloud, to this service provider industry to be able to really move forward to that next generation of delivery of service to customers?
I think it's nothing else than mandatory. I don't think that we can see any company go all the way in, going with a massive cloud transformation without building the FinOps part near to it. Now, obviously, there are companies that give this as a service, as part, which is disconnected typically from the operation itself. I can probably mention a few of them, like CloudEarth and so on, or CloudWise. By the way, also the cloud themselves, the cloud provider themselves today bringing some cloud FinOps type of solutions. However, I think that it's not about the technology or the tool. It is more about the processes that need to be accompanied, understanding when anomaly has happened, understanding what you should need to do with that. So, for example, I give a simple example that I saw about a year ago, which was Black Friday. So you are a telco and you're running your operation on the cloud, and you suddenly in the morning see that there is a huge hike in cloud usage. Is it a problem? Well, if it's Black Friday, it's probably going to be something that you are enjoying from it because it's actually showing you have better sales. So therefore, the artificial intelligence part of the FinOp and the understanding of the business side, not just connecting this to how much you are using, but also how much you are enjoying. What's your benefit? What's your business KPIs? Connecting the business KPIs to your FinOp is mandatory to make a strong FinOp solution. And I think this is where you see the maturity level grow. So a few years ago, we all knew how to deal with the bill at the end of the month, and we use some kind of tools to see whether the bill is going wrongly. We then moved to see annuality. We suddenly see a specific part of the system scaling up, using more and more resources, and it is not as typical as before. Then we start to see the artificial intelligence that actually identify those anomalies and try to connect them to other things. But I think that only in the stage where those will be connected to the business KPIs, to actually what is required for the business to scale up or scale down or change, I think that will be a real FinOp. So controlling financially an application without understanding the actual need of the usage of the system is very limited. And I think that this is where most of our are at this stage. I think that in the coming year or two, we will start to see a much more advanced FinOp that is accompanied with a very strong AI. And I think that AI in general is the biggest change that we will see in the way that we operate, because it will allow self-healing. It will allow self-service in a more advanced way. It will allow the system to introduce new features in an automatic way. This will support us to be more resilient on one end, to be more efficient on the other end, but at the same time allow us to run at the speed that the business requires us to run. And this is the formula, because if you are building resilience and you are building financial barriers without having the ability to support the business, then you're doing it wrong.
Absolutely. And so we only have a few minutes left, Yaron, but I want to ask one other question. Of course, the hyperscale cloud, the AWSs, the Azures, the Google, GCPs, IBMs, Oracles, they're all garnering a lot of attention. Public cloud, while it's been a migration, and we're still in its infancy, I believe, in a lot of ways. Less than a third of workloads are in the public cloud. Amdocs, you've turned to the public cloud. You've announced partnerships. I recently attended a webinar that you did with AWS, an announcement. I'd love to understand a little bit about the thinking of your firm in terms of partnering with public cloud providers, as I think a lot of companies are wanting to make sure they're building infrastructure that's going to be on these public clouds, that's going to utilize and leverage these public clouds. And so if you touch on that a little bit for maybe a couple minutes, I'd love to hear what Amdocs' thinking is behind that before we wrap up today.
When you look at the Amdocs solutions today, we have the ability to run on basically any cloud. And if a customer come and tell me, Yaron, I need to have our system running on IBM, on VMware solution or on Google, I'll be happy to do that. We have the ability. We try that. We run it on them. We know how to do it. That shouldn't be a problem. However, we did think that cooperating with cloud providers, and we're doing it both with Amazon and with Azure, will bring us to a new level of relationship, and we could be able to offer solutions to customers which are more inherited within the cloud itself. So first of all, we are running all the certification, and we're doing all the processes to have the ability to do managed services on Amazon and Azure. We are working very closely with both companies there. We are resellers of Azure and Amazon. So if you come to us and you want to buy through us the capacity, what we're trying to do is not just selling you the capacity, but actually, because we are running our own systems, we can ensure you that how much you're going to spend. And basically, if you remember a few minutes ago when we talked about the barriers, we talked about the cost, about the open check, and the fear of how much we're going to spend. Over here, if I'm giving you the capacity and I'm giving you the systems, I can control how much I can commit on how much you're going to spend. So this is definitely a benefit of getting a relationship like that allow us to understand better how to control, how to how to get the most out of the cloud. And obviously, I think that today we have so much to learn from the cloud providers. You mentioned the engineering reliability. We are running SRE, which is originally from Google. For site reliability engineering, the method that we are using to make sure that our system are resilient, our service is stable and resilient, we learned that from companies like Google, and we implement, obviously, to fit the telco-oriented company. But I think that if we look at the cloud providers as partners, you have so much to learn from them, and you have so much to gain from them, that I think that Amdocs had a lot to enjoy from this relationship, and we are enjoying it.
Absolutely. And those are great answers. And Yaron, thank you so much for attending and being part of this podcast today. I have no doubt that the future of enterprise and service provider connectivity is going to be hybrid. It's going to be taking the best of breed. That's been seen with the way cloud is continuing to develop and the way it's being utilized and rolled out. It's going to be very similar in the service provider and communications businesses. And I'm sure Amdocs will continue to participate in a very meaningful way. So Yaron Sverdlov, thank you again. Thank you, Amdocs, for being part of today's Futurum Tech Podcast interview series.
Thank you, Daniel.
For everyone out there, please check out the show notes where we'll provide you some links to learn more about Yaron, the team over there at Amdocs, and what the team is working on. Also, hit that subscribe button and stick with us here at the Futurum Tech Podcast for our regular weekly shows, as well as our interviews with leaders from tech companies around the world. We really appreciate all of you that tune in every week or that tune in regularly. You can find us on Apple. You can find us on Spotify. And of course, we have video and audio content on YouTube and across the internet and social media. For this episode of the Futurum Tech Podcast interview series, I got to say goodbye. It's been fun to be with you, but we're out of there. Thank you for joining us on this week's Futurum Tech Podcast, the interview series. Please be sure to subscribe to us on iTunes and stay with us each and every week as we bring more interviews and more shows from our weekly Futurum Tech Podcast.